Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Children's Worship. I'm so glad to see you, and I'm glad that you're here with us. Today we're going to get started right away. I'm going to turn on our Christ candle. I have two because I have one that looks like you, the one that you guys have, and then I have the one that we always have in our Children's Worship room. The candle is to remind you of two things. One, that God is always with us no matter what, even if we don't have a candle, and that He calls us to be the light of the world. Now, we haven't been talking a lot about what it means to be the light of the world in these last few weeks, but today I want to remind you of that. So one of the ways that we can show that God be the light of the world to others is by taking care of the things that we have. In the next couple of weeks, we are going to be celebrating Earth Day, which is at the end of October, rescheduled when it's normally in the spring. But we didn't get to do it this spring, so it's happening in October this year. I have a coloring sheet here that I'm going to be posting on our website so you guys can download it. This is not something that's in your goodie bag from me. But it says the word care, and it has a picture of a person giving a big hug to planet Earth. We are called to care for the planet and to care for the things that God has created and given to us. We're going to be learning 3 words, one each week, the next couple of weeks, that help us understand what we can practice and celebrate on Earth Day. So the first one is the word reduce. Now, I haven't colored this in, so it might be harder to see, but these words right here, reduce, you can write them out and then color this page in. What does it mean to reduce? Reduce means to use less of something. So here's a picture of a girl brushing her teeth. And the way that she is probably reducing is that instead of leaving that water running when she has her toothpaste on and she's brushing her teeth, she's turning the water off, brushing her teeth, and then turning it back on when she needs to rinse her mouth out, instead of leaving the water running the whole time, because it wastes water, and water is something that God has given us and something that He wants us to treat with care. So this is one example of how you might be able to reduce the way you use things. You can reduce the use of power by turning the lights out when you leave a room. You can reduce the use of water by anytime you wash your hands, instead of leaving the water running for those 20 seconds that we're supposed to be washing our hands, you can turn the water on, get a lather, turn the water off, suds up, rinse off, and then turn the water back on when we're ready to rinse. Little things like that might seem like not that big of a deal, but all those little teeny tiny things really add up. So what I would like you to do this week is color this picture, have your grown-up take a picture of it and send it to me. And if you think of one way that you can reduce the use of something to be helpful to the earth, send it to me, and we're going to compile those and share those. So that's something that I'd like you to think about when we talk about being the light of the world to others. This week, we're going to continue our story about Abraham and Sarah and their son Isaac. Now, if you remember, right at the end of last week's story, Isaac was born, and they didn't think that they were going to have children. And so Isaac was a special blessing, and it fulfilled God's promise to Abraham and Sarah. So now we're going to learn a little bit more about Isaac and Isaac's life. So Isaac was Abraham and Sarah's son. Isaac grew to be a man. He married, became a husband, and wanted to be a father. But Isaac's wife Rebekah did not have any children. Isaac prayed that God would bless them with children. God answered Isaac's prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant. Rebekah gave birth to 2 twin boys, just as God had promised. The first child was named Esau. The second twin son was named Jacob. As the boys grew, they liked to do very different things. Esau liked to hunt in the fields with his bow and arrow. Jacob was quiet. He liked to stay at home. Because Esau was the firstborn, he would receive a very special blessing from his father Isaac when Isaac was about to die, something called a birthright. This was very, very special and only given to the firstborn son. But Esau did not care very much about his birthright. One day, Esau came in from the fields. He was very hungry after a long hunting trip. Jacob was busy cooking dinner. It smelled good. Esau looked inside the pot and said, "Give me some of that food. I am half starved." Jacob thought a moment, then he said, "I'll give you something to eat if you will sell me your birthright." Jacob really wanted the birthright. Esau agreed. "I'll sell it to you. What good is it to me anyway? I'm dying of hunger." "Do you promise me that I can have your birthright?" And Esau said, "Yes, I promise you, you can have it." With that promise, Jacob gave Esau something to eat. Now, this story uses a word and some things that we're not very familiar with, something called a birthright. So Esau and Jacob were the 2 sons, but because Esau was firstborn, he was going to get a very special blessing from his father. And it basically was his land, his cattle, all of the things that the property that the dad had would go to the firstborn son. Esau, he didn't really care about that stuff, right? He liked to hunt, he liked to come home, but he really didn't want to be taking care of all the animals in the house and all of those sorts of things. Jacob really wanted that. Now you would think, because they were siblings and that they should be kind to each other, that Esau would just give it to Jacob. And he, in fact, in this story, said that he was going to do that. Now, of course, they didn't talk to their parents about this, because I'm guessing that Isaac probably would not have agreed to that, because it wasn't the way things went. It had to go to the firstborn son. So instead of, even though Esau promised the birthright, he really wasn't going to give it. He just did that because he was hungry and he wanted some food. So what ends up happening is that Jacob tricks Esau into getting the birthright. And when his father is getting ready he's sick and he's in bed and he's about to give the birthright, Jacob actually is really sneaky. Because Esau is bigger and he always smells like outdoors because he hunts a lot, he actually pretends to be his brother, and he goes into the bedroom where his dad is getting ready to die, and he receives the birthright instead of Esau. This makes Esau really mad. Really, really mad. So Esau says, I'm going to hurt you. I'm so mad at you, I'm going to come after you. And so the mom, Rebecca, is so worried for her son Jacob that she tells Jacob, go, run away where Esau can't find you, because I know if Esau finds you, he's going to hurt you, and I don't want to lose you. So it's really a very exciting story. For my slightly older kids, if you have a Bible at home, you can find this story in Genesis chapter 25. It's kind of an exciting and really very action-packed story to read. Also a little confusing. So the craft for today is, I have a set of cards, and if you look at it, let me show you what it looks like before you are going to find this page. It has a bunch of holes in it, and you're going to cut out into squares each of these. And you want to actually put the story cards in order. I took a little piece of yarn from the very first craft that I had given you with the camel, and just to tie them together to keep them in order. But it just tells the story that I just told you, and then it'll help you remember it. It's called Birthright Stew. It says, Esau and Jacob are twins. Esau is hungry. Jacob made stew. Esau traded his birthright so he could eat Jacob's stew. Jacob lied to get the special blessing. And then Jacob runs away from Esau. That is the short version of the story that we just heard today. You're going to hear next week a little bit the continuation of this story and what happens, and if Jacob and Esau can make up and still be brothers and still get past the hurt that they've caused each other. And it's really a good story, so I hope you'll join us next week. So with that, I'm going to close us in prayer. Dear Jesus, thank you for continuing to share stories of God and God's people from the Bible. Please help us to always remember that we can trust you, that God will keep his promises, and that even though we sometimes, and people sometimes do things that aren't very nice and aren't very kind to each other, that God is still faithful and that he still loves us, and that he'll forgive us when we find our way back to him. And now we're going to close with the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next time.